Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, where we uncover the pivotal stories that shape extraordinary leaders. I'm Dusty Holcomb, and on this show, we don't just talk about leadership, we decode it. In every episode, we sit down with the change makers who've walked through the fire, challenged the status quo, and emerged with wisdom worth sharing. These aren't just lessons, they're lived experiences, real moments that reveal the mindset, resilience, and clarity behind creating lasting impact. Today, you're going to hear one of those stories. Leo Gestetner started his first business at 13 years old so he could upgrade the family computer, and he's never looked back since. He's launched 14 businesses, sold 6, moved from London to LA, and somewhere along the way, he figured out that scaling a company means nothing if you're running on empty. Now, as the CEO of Thanks and the host of a Founder's Life podcast, Leo is proving you can build big without burning out. If you're chasing success but craving balance, this conversation is the permission and the playbook. Let's get into it. This is Leadership Unlocked. Leo, I am just delighted to have some time with you today. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. You've had a fascinating life and you live a fascinating life as a digital nomad and really have embraced things before they became popular and common and all those things. And I can't wait to dig into the reasons why, but let me just start with saying welcome and thank you. I'm so delighted you're here today.
Well, thank you, Dusty. I appreciate you inviting me and I'm looking forward to diving in.
I did a little research and I was learning about you, and you have a fascinating story and a fascinating journey. And you're an entrepreneur, a multiple times entrepreneur. And I'm really curious. I think I read that your first business you started at age 13. And I'm curious as to what planted the seed for you that you needed to go start a business, that you needed to do something. Was it you wanted to make money? Was it you wanted to, show off for your friends? What was the moment of inspiration that made you go, I'm going to start my own business at 13 years old?
Well, I mean, I come from an entrepreneurial family, but I think for me it was my grandmother had bought a computer of brand that no one outside of the UK would ever have heard of. And I was 13, my brother and sister were a bit older, but they were off at boarding school. And she bought us this as a present, and I wanted to get a better one. I was the one using it. So I sold it secondhand. I thought that was easy, and I bought a new one. And then I'm like, well, actually, that was quite easy. So I started originally buying and selling secondhand computers. And then by the age of 16, I was one of the main dealers for North London for the largest computer brand at the time in the UK, selling new computers and software and things like that.
That's amazing. Well, you mentioned you came from an entrepreneurial family. Unpack that a little bit, because those seeds were obviously planted at a young age and very deeply, because you didn't waste any time letting them bloom for you.
Yeah, I mean, my great-grandfather and then my grandfather had been entrepreneurs and immigrants. And then actually that was on my father's side and on my mother's side as well in a much smaller way, but my grandmother and grandfather, I actually didn't know either of my grandfathers. They died before I was born, but I knew both my grandmothers as well. But my mother's mother, I mean, they always had something, whether it was a restaurant, what now you might call a B&B. They always had something, some small entrepreneurial enterprise that was sort of paying the bills. From my mother's side, my father's side, it was on a bigger side.
So with your grandma got this computer and you said, man, I need a better one. There's got to be a better way. What did you learn from that? What was the lesson that you can look back on now? Sometimes we don't understand these keystone lessons that we learn in life because we're too busy doing life in the moment. But when you look back on that now, what was the keystone inflection point or moment that came from embracing that opportunity and then building it into something serious?
I think in the end, it's grabbing opportunities in whatever form they take. We pivot like any entrepreneur, as you know. Nothing ends up the way you planned when you started. Not that at the age of 13 I planned anything, but things pivot. I mean, I've had many businesses over the years that I had one vision when it started, and it changes. You follow the windy path to wherever it takes you. Some are successful and some aren't. Again, that's the entrepreneurial journey. It's not all easy, but it's all fun in the end, hopefully.
You know, I want to hear you tell your story and walk the journey, but I think you were touching on something that I would be remiss in letting slip away and not double clicking onto it right now. The ability to pivot. Somebody actually told me that when I started my own entrepreneurial ventures, they said, no matter what you're doing today, it's going to look different a year from now. And don't hold on to it too tightly, because if you do, you're going to miss the opportunities to grow. You're going to miss the changes you need to make, but hold on tightly to what you believe in. So it was an interesting dichotomy to anchor on what I believed in, but not on what I was doing, because I would need to know how to pivot. I'd love to hear, how do you think about pivoting? What is it when and we'll get into a story or two about it, but when you think about pivoting, what is it that you want to teach others about, what to pay attention to? How you think about it? What's your philosophy? I'm fascinated by this.
I think in the end with an entrepreneur, don't get so stuck on your idea that you can't see anything else. It's talk to other people, listen to other people, get feedback. Customers, potential customers, friends. Ideally not too much on the friends side, because they probably will agree with you unless they're good at challenging you. But, it's listening to what people have to say. I mean, people will tell you what the market is actually looking for. And maybe it is the idea you had. Maybe it's a slight change. Maybe you need to completely change what you're talking about, and that's fine. In the end, you're in it for the entrepreneurial journey, hopefully not just one idea.
Tell me a story, where you had to do this, where you learned, and you've got a lot of wisdom in this statement of, not too many friends, right? Because that becomes an echo chamber, or a little dangerous. That sounds like you may have learned that the hard way, but tell me a story about what you've learned or a pivot you had to make based on that wisdom of listening and learning and not falling in love with your idea.
Made a lot of pivots over the years. I've done a lot of businesses. But if I look at, for example, I've got a staffing agency right now. So we provide skilled remote staff to US companies. We've got, and if I look at it, we've almost made two pivots over time. So we started that business as more of a portal, so a staffing portal. Think of it like an Upwork or a Fiverr. We had our own angle on that, but that kind of thing. And as part of that, we had a white glove service where we'd help people a little more active rather than just subscription. And we quite quickly realized that was what people really wanted in the market. This was 2019. It actually, especially as we went into 2020 and COVID, it was, how can we help people who don't know what they're doing and who wanted full-time staff? So, we ended up being that white glove, and the side that was the portal, in the end, we just closed down because there was that wasn't what the business was. And you've got to choose what to focus on, because if you try and be everything for everyone, again, you just can't. So in the end, it became then, at the time we called it a white glove, but in the end, a staffing agency, you'd call it more now. And again, we not really pivoted, but we refocused, I would say, about a month ago. We were redoing the website, and you update the website. This is again one of those things, you know your story, but you're a terrible person in terms of you get stuck in that story. So our website, we created that website, call it 4 years ago. And yes, it got updated. And actually 3 months ago, we did a major update in our messaging and how we want to call things. But then we came to a realization literally a month ago. I'm looking at this and I'm like, this isn't what we do anymore. It's not completely different, but it was a complicated message. It was, we were all about a staffing agency because that's what we started as, and that was still what we called ourselves. And that's often how I describe it. I need to get better at it. But actually, what people want nowadays, we realized, was much more around recruitment. Still a more white glove recruitment, still someone who understands international recruitment, somebody who can potentially even help with employing those people afterwards. But it was much more of a recruitment model because more people are already hiring internationally now, but doesn't mean they can find the right people. So, when we redid the website, the messaging is fundamentally different and much, much simpler than what our website was just before.
It's fascinating to hear you walk through that journey, because what I'm hearing you say is Like we were relentlessly focused on and are relentlessly focused on what is it the customer needs? What's the value we're creating for the customer? And oh, by the way, we actually need to make sure that our marketing, our positioning, our branding fits that. And so often it's easy to fall in love with the way we've always done things and not keep those two things in sync. Like you have to keep updating yourself to make sure you're really bringing value to the customer. And it's so easy to overcomplicate things.
I agree. And I've also seen that with a brand new business. So we've got our Healthy Habits app, which is launching next week. We've been developing that the last year. That's Livio. My daughter, my 23-year-old daughter, is actually a co-founder in that business. And we've been developing that over the last year. And the problem is we were ready to launch, or we are ready to launch. We're launching it next week. But we're looking at it and saying, well, actually, in the last year, I wouldn't say the market's completely changed, but something simpler is what's really needed. So we're like, well, okay, so we can launch it as it is now, but we've already realized what we need to do for version 2, like a complete redesign, and that will launch within 2 months.
Oh, wow.
Because we've realized what we need to do, and it will actually be almost not from scratch, but a lot of it. We'll take a lot of what we've learned, but then it'll launch. But again, the reason we're launching next week, not waiting, is because the other problem people have is you just wait until something's right. And I remember reading, I think it was the CEO of Google. This was a book I read probably 7-8 years ago. And he said, we believe in launching quickly and iterating quickly.
Yes.
You know, it isn't going to be right. You can't wait until things are perfect. And the other problem on that is what you want, and you'll look at something and say, well, it's only 90% there. Okay, but that other 10% probably takes 50% of the resources of the first 90%.
Yes.
And you're the only person who'd actually notice that it's missing. So again, launch quickly and make those changes, fine, but don't wait until something's perfect. That's another lesson I think I've learned over the years. Otherwise, you just waste time and money and things just never happen.
You know, so I've also learned that lesson. I am continuing to relearn that lesson because I'll get into my own little doom loop of wanting to make things better and tuning and engineering and tweaking, and then go, well, let's just get the darn thing out there. And then we're going to learn what the customer thinks, which is so much more important than what I think, you know. And it was easy when I first heard the word pivot to think about it through the lens of business ventures and an entrepreneurship. But I'm really hearing you talk about pivoting in life and learning and taking these reflections to make yourself better, to make, you know, the services and your impact on the world better. Like, let's just not think about this through the lens of business, but, you know, the experiences you're now introducing your kids to, and so that they have a different lens on the world. I'm curious, when did you have an inflection point or a moment that made you go, I need to live differently? Like, what was the genesis for you to go, I want to be a digital nomad, for example? Because you were doing that before that became like the thing to do. Like, you've been thinking about that for a little while and doing it for a little while. What was the genesis for that? What caused that pivot?
Well, it's interesting. You know, somebody said to me, because I've been fully remote, I haven't had an office for any of my businesses since 2012. Somebody said to me, you were a digital nomad just working from one place. So I think, you know, I've been a very present father, and my kids are the center of my life. And that has meant that, you know, I did travel a lot less, especially over the last few years, because to be honest, it was much more important to me, especially as my son, the younger one, was getting ready to go to university. To me, it was much more important to spend the time with him and my daughter when she was around, because I always knew that at some point they were gone, and I can. So some of it was sort of, you could almost say, holding things back. Instead of doing some of that stuff that I might have otherwise done. I'm like, you know, I'm really happy to wait. Like, actually, I'm enjoying the moment. I'm enjoying the time with the kids, and I've spent a lot of time with my kids. And so it was holding that back. My son said to me, must have been, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. So I've been talking about this for probably 2 or 3 years. And he said to me, you can't wait till I leave home. And I said to him, that's not true at all, actually. I love the time we spend together. And since COVID, we spent like 3 hours a day together, weightlifting or boxing. Then we had dinner and watching TV. We had a whole routine. And I'm like, not true at all. I love the time we spend together and I'm in no hurry. And when you're gone, I'm out of here. The two can coexist. I'm in no hurry. But yes, when you're gone, I'm off.
I love that. Like, and I love that your son was calling you out and saying, hey, you don't have to wait. But then you're also kind of navigating this dual tension of, well, I'm going to be where I am right now, but I'm going to plan for the future and have a different mindset. But you know, I don't have to be there yet. And I think a lot of people, myself included, we get so focused on where we want to be that we forget where we are. And like, I know that I spend a lot of time on self-reflection and thinking about that, because that is that's a challenge. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of people in the world, to be present, to be appreciative of where you are in this moment. And we aren't promised tomorrow. We never know what might happen, but we can't do everything. And so let's do the most important things right where we are. I love that you've done that. That's super cool.
Definitely. It's that to me is you're embracing the moment. It's working out what's important while still prioritizing. So it's like, I was lucky enough to have you on my podcast. And, I talk, it's quite a focus around talking about the sort of balance in life and about how to, work hard, have a great relationship with family, whatever that means to you, stay healthy, have fun, stay balanced. And I talk about people like, well, there's no such thing as balance. I'm like, well, there is, but balance is not perpetually in balance. Ooh. It's working out what that means to you. There was someone I had on my podcast, a few weeks ago, and he said, well, balance to him might well be working 18 hours a day, but then go on holiday for a week and pretty much switching off. Balance look differently to different people. To me, that's not quite that. But the point is, at some point, balance is, we've just got way too much work we need to do. At other points, we just want to spend the time with the kids or those that we love. Other times we're, running a marathon or doing a triathlon, and that, to be honest, it takes a lot of the time. So it's whatever shape it takes. I think it's finding what's right for us. And that's also the advantage, which is why I like to talk about it on the podcast, is to show other people what you can do. Because the advantage we've got is we've got the grey hair. What comes with that is the knowledge that, you can do this. It's almost like, not exactly the same example, but it's almost like you're so much more chilled on the second kid because you've got the knowledge that they don't break. In the end, life will be fine.
That's a perfect example. Like sometimes when we're navigating it the first time, we're holding on so tightly, and then it'll be okay. The time will pass. I loved being on your podcast because you are very much focused on balance and the ability to understand and interpret it means different things to different people at different times in different seasons. If you were going back and talking to a younger version of Leo, pick the series, the time frame or the decade, what's the piece of advice that now, having had some more of those experiences, and you've got gray hair, I just have none, having some of those experiences that you think could have been impactful or influential in a younger version of Leo, the things you wish you'd knew back then, but you couldn't know until you'd gone through them?
Putting aside the specific things, should have taken that deal when someone offered a lot of money for that. Or,
yes.
But putting aside those kind of things, I think it's probably that, relax and enjoy the journey a bit. I mean, I definitely, when I was younger, was too goal orientated. And don't get me wrong, that's important as well. I mean, we're all, by the nature of an entrepreneur, we're all basically A-type. But, doesn't mean you need to be off the scale A-type. I think it's enjoying that journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint, another way you can put it. I actually had someone on my podcast who talked about, who's a serious runner, and like does ultra marathons and trains people to ultra marathons and things like that. And you know, he quoted someone else actually, but some Harvard professor or something. But what I loved about it is he's talking about how, you know, it was about marathons, but you could turn the same to business, which is, it's not meant to be easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And there wouldn't be the achievement. The achievement is that it isn't easy. Same as, you know, you win that big sale. The achievement of winning that big sale when you first had 99 people say no, and that was, by the way, 900 people or 9,000 people not even bother responding to you asking to have a conversation. That's what makes it so satisfying.
Yeah. When you think back now, what is one of the most satisfying or like where you went, this is cool. Like I'm sad, like, yes, because I completely agree with you. And I got that advice about enjoy the journey, don't focus on the goal when I was 22 years old. And I didn't even understand it. Like I probably even still struggle with it. I'll be honest with you. It's still like a constant tension that I'm navigating, you know, 30 years later. What's something that when you did the work and you put in the effort and it happened, where you could sit back and go, wow, I'm not talking about just financial or anything else, but like the reward for the 900 people that didn't say yes or didn't acknowledge and the 99 that say no. Do you have any like that?
So on a business perspective or a personal perspective?
You pick.
So I'll give two on the personal perspective, actually. The first one is completing my first marathon 9 months ago. So that was in November. I'd only decided in July. So until July, I had always said I will never run a marathon. I've been doing half marathons. I mean, I was enjoying half marathons over the last decade. I mean, if you look at me 20 years ago, I was 95 pounds heavier than I am now. I certainly wasn't running big distances then. But for the last decade, I'd been running half marathons and enjoying them. And I always said I will never do a marathon. I just didn't interest me. I didn't, you know, I don't, because I am the healthiest I've ever been, I don't feel that same pull that some people to prove something, because to be honest, I can look at myself in the mirror and I've sort of proved myself something already because I can just see, both from a physical, but also, you know, in so many other ways. So I suddenly decided to do the marathon, did the marathon, wanted to do it in under 4 hours because somebody told me once, if you're going to run a marathon, it's got to be under 4 hours. I don't know. And did it with 10 seconds. So actually I ran through the clock, and the last 7 miles, there's some great pictures of me. In the last 7 miles, every step was, oh my God, this is painful. Like my whole body was suddenly cramping, and like the problem is, any good runner would say, which I'm not, I ran way too fast at the beginning. So suddenly I hit the wall. And at mile 18.7, I can picture it. I can picture where I was. And suddenly my whole body was like, whoa. And, you know, there were points where, you know, I'd jog a little bit and then I'd walk a little bit. And I'd always wanted to do it under 4. I didn't, you know, principle, based on my half marathon time, I can do an under 3:45. I have no idea. But anything under 4, I was happy with. And I just about make it over the line. And my watch is saying to me, I'm like, I'm okay. It's a few seconds. And I look, and the clock, which is not just the starting clock, but in principle is my time, says 4 hours and 1 second. I'm like, what the? And then I actually go print my medal. Like they had a thing on the back, and they printed the actual time, which for some reason was wrong there, which was 3:59:50. I'm like, okay, that felt good. I'm happy with that. And I'm like, you know, it's funny. I walked through that having been in pain and literally not able to walk. I'm like, you know what? I love that. It was a good challenge, but an achievable challenge. You know, yes, I was sore. Of course you're going to be sore. You put your body through 4 hours of running. If you're not sore, then, I don't know, you're not 52. But, you know, but it was fun. So I did another one. And now I said I've tried to do the 7 majors. But that achievement of doing a marathon from in I don't know what it was, 3-4 months after I decided to do one, was a great achievement for myself to say, you know what, I couldn't have done this a few years ago. That felt great. The other thing which has taken me, it's, people used to say, well, I used to say, I'm very lucky that I have a great relationship with my kids. And then, I came to a realization probably about 6 months ago where I stopped saying that. And I think someone actually said it to me. And I stopped saying I'm lucky because it's not about luck. Things are what you make of them. And I've been a very present father. I am there for my kids and they know that. And yes, that's why I have a great relationship with them. And I think it's, you make your own luck. That's another actually great one I always love. I don't know who actually said it, but I think it was Ford, like the motor car Ford. And a journalist was interviewing him and he said, oh, Mr. Ford, you seem to be very lucky. And he said, well, it's funny, the harder I work, the luckier I become. So whether that be you're working on your relationships with your kids, with your business partner, whatever, whether you're working harder in business, whether you're working harder running, whatever it is, yes, everything needs a bit of luck. It does. You need to have called that customer at the time that they are looking for your product. Mm-hmm. There's luck in everything. And the harder you work, the more lucky you become. Because in the end, yes, you could be lucky and call one customer and get that unbelievable thing. Or you might have to call 100 or 1,000. And yes, there's some luck still because they still needed it at that point. But you worked hard to get that.
I love that, and I'm probably mixing 2 or 3 people's quotes, but I've always had this mantra of, luck favors the prepared mind. Like you've got to work hard and do the work. Same thing you're saying, and you got to be prepared for it. It's amazing to me, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. How, when you look at the things that happen for you as opportunities for luck versus looking at things that happen to you, and then you think of it's bad luck. Well, yeah, it's bad luck that the market crashed 2.5 weeks before you got your deal done. Terribly bad luck. Had no control over it, but you didn't wallow in it. You pivoted. Going back to that word, what are your thoughts on how people choose to receive things as lucky? Or they're bad luck or whatever. Like, does the world happen to you or for you is kind of the genesis there. I'd be curious to get your thoughts.
I think as we said, really, it's shucks what you make of it. But I'm very much a glass half full guy. So I'm not the best at understanding glass half empty people. I mean, I know lots of them and I try to understand them. I try to empathize, but I'm honestly not the best at it. I'd like to be. I don't believe in analyzing the past too much. As in, so like, take therapy. Some people need it 100%. It's a massive benefit for them. I get that. For me, I'm not looking to overanalyze the past in the way that I believe everything, the negatives and the positives in the past, make who we are today. For me, that doesn't define who I am tomorrow. Now, some people, as I said, need therapy, or some people have real trauma that they have to work through. That's 100% real, and they've got to work through it before they can move on.
Of course.
For me, I'm like, okay, that's who I was yesterday. Only I can define who I am tomorrow. I'm not saying it's as simple as that. No. I've got, for example, a list of, on my journey right now, I've actually got in my Notion workbook, and my daughter got me into Notion, which I'm actually quite enjoying. I only started a week ago. She's been telling me for about a year, but I only started using it a week ago. I really got into it. I've got a page called My Journey. And on that, it's got, my certain digital nomad things, like what I'm going to practically be doing. And then also some of the, let's call it expansion, being, mental, physical, whatever, certain things that I am looking to achieve on my journey. Some of those might happen in the next few months. Some of those might take years. But I've started, I've got some ideas of what it is that I need to achieve on my journey. So I start to write those down so that I can research as I get time. And I think the other thing is, it's fun to learn in one form or another. It's fun to expand. whether you want to look at that on a physical perspective, when you want to look at that a conscious perspective, you can look at it in many different ways, but it's fun to expand our knowledge. It's fun to expand who we are.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. We think about the world very similarly. I'm curious, what did you learn between mile 18.7 and 26.2 on the marathon? What did you learn about yourself?
Well, one thing I learned is the marathon wasn't 26.2, it was 26.5 because they measure the shortest distance. So most people don't run the shortest distance because that would be a line between two corners. And so the first thing I realized is I'm staring at my watch thinking, only 0.2 to go, only 0.1 to go, 26.2. What the hell? Am I finishing this thing at some point? So that's the first thing. Second thing is you could be rude about the Queen from like 100 years ago who made it 26.2 because she wanted it to finish in front of the Royal Box at Windsor instead of the 26 miles it had been before. But anyway.
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, literally. So the marathon until then had been 26 miles. But the London Olympics, the Queen wanted the marathon to finish in front of the Royal Box. So they made it 26.2 miles so it could finish.
God save the Queen. That's awesome. I did not know that. That's amazing.
I think, what did I learn? I learned that you can, I guess, in the end, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. I could easily have collapsed at the side of the road. I had points where I literally could barely move. I was in such pain. But in the end, I pushed through it. And not in a stupid way, not in a David Goggins, who, God, as I love his book. You read David Goggins,
course,
Can't Break Me, So, okay, I'm not running with broken legs. And by the way, if I break my leg, I ain't planning to run. So I'm not saying that level of pushing through. But, you can push through a lot. And you can achieve a lot if you really set your mind to it.
Yes, you can. It's so fascinating. I have had a similar experience looking at my watch going, well, they didn't measure this thing right. Or, I missed a turn somewhere because I should be done by now. It's amazing how, I think some of the best lessons I've ever learned about myself came in those darkest moments on the backside of a marathon, the backside of an Ironman, where you are pushing through the physical pain, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. The lessons learned, the things that matter, and I love how the moment of frustration when you thought you had been over by a second or two, and then the delight when you get it, and it's 10, 11 seconds. It means nothing in the grand scheme of life, but we've anchored on the goal, and that from frustration to euphoria over 10 seconds because you'd achieved what you wanted to achieve and made that effort worthwhile. It's amazing how the human mind works in that regard. It really is.
Very true.
All right. So I'm going to pivot us a bit, Leo, because I want to ask some rapid fire questions. And you've given me so much to chew on, but I'm really curious, and you mentioned David Goggins' book, you've mentioned several other books. What is a book that you believe everyone should read? It's a book that you give away, or it's a book that you go back to. It's made an impact on your life. What's a book that you believe everybody should read?
That's a really tough one. And I say that I'm not someone who has any mentors in life. It's just not something. I take little bits from lots of places, and that's just my mentality. I wouldn't pick one book. I think it depends. But for example, a recent book I read, oversubscribed. It's a great book. I mean, you someone like me, someone like you will read that and say, well, yeah, I know most of this. It's obvious. And to be honest, the 10, 15% that you either didn't know or weren't thinking of at that time made the whole book worth reading. Mm-hmm. So it depends what kind of business you're in. But in the kind of businesses, in some ways that we're in, a book like Oversubscribed is excellent. I think, for me, I listen to a mix of books. Mm-hmm. So I listen a lot. When I'm running, I listen to books. So if I'm out on runs. And I listen to sometimes just fiction, call it junk fiction, for want of a better word, because that's perfect. Switch the mind off. All good. And then sometimes those business books that people recommend. At the moment, got one I'm reading at the moment, which actually is quite an interesting one. Or actually listening. I don't really read. I listen a lot. Pattern Breakers. I don't know if you've come across that one.
I have not, but I'm adding it to my list.
So
tell me more.
The guy who's written it, I've forgotten his name, but he's one of the grandfathers of the VC industry, of the venture capital industry. So he talks about all these early stage businesses. He's talking about Lyft. He's talking about Airbnb. All the and by the way, how they all pivoted. They weren't the business they started off as, but actually it's a good book, Pattern Breakers. So I think it's worth looking at different books that are appropriate for whatever industry you're in. And I think you can get something from everything. I just, as I said, I'm the kind of person who loves to get little bits, all the personal growth things I've done over the years. There's no one person I say, oh, that was perfect. No, I love a bit of that. I love a bit of that. And you make it your own.
You and I are very alike in that regard, in that I enjoy reading lots of different things, lots of different perspectives to go, oh, that's a nugget that I like. I want to put that tool on the tool belt, or, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought about it that way. And rather than just becoming a disciple of one philosophy or one way, making it your own, to your point. It's like your own recipe, your own unique understanding based on what interests you. And also, like, I love that you mentioned junk books. Like, I don't think there is junk books. It's whatever spurs your mind, gives you the relaxation, gives you the renewal that you need. For me, a junk book is a history book, because I'm fascinated with learning about how other cultures worked or how other leaders led. And I don't read it through the leadership lens. I read it because I'm just fascinated with how people think and how they thought. So there's no junk. It's maybe there is some junk, but it's just whatever gives your mind the ability to be better tomorrow. Let me ask you something. Are you leading off of instinct? I mean, you've got the vision, you've built the thing, but most leaders I talk to are still flying without a system. Vision to Victory, the mastermind, changes that. It's a 12-week experience where we install the leadership operating system you've always needed: purpose, strategy, cadence, metrics, execution. This isn't a course. It's not more content. It's a small group of leaders who are done chasing clarity and ready to lead with it. You'll walk out with a full leadership operating system, a trusted circle of peers, and a repeatable way to scale without losing yourself along the way. There are only 12 seats in this group, and most are already spoken for. It's an application-only process. Go to arcusgroup.com/mastermind to apply. Okay, what is a daily practice that you will not skip without any excuses?
So I'm not sure I do have a truly wouldn't skip, but I can tell you. So I don't believe in doing anything 100%, which is like our app is about healthy habits. Well, we're one of the first habits apps that doesn't say you have to do something daily. If you say you're going to do this 4 times a week, that's fine. That's your habit then. So I actually don't believe, I eat very healthily. I rarely eat dessert. So, and what I eat is high protein, low carbs, etc. But yeah, sometimes I feel like having, yesterday we were walking through the market with my daughter and the crepe looked absolutely delicious. I didn't need the crepe, but I had the crepe. Who cares?
Yeah.
So, but generally I can tell you what my routine would be 90+% of the time. I do meditate each day. I go for a walk or a run basically every day, even if I'm in the gym. So if I go to the gym and I've got an hour's weightlifting, take this morning. I had an hour's weightlifting before that. I did a 5K walk with my daughter. I need to move. My body needs to move. If I'm just sitting still, not only do I feel sore, my mind is not focused. So I get up early. I like to move. That's important. So, I meditate. I did meditate for 3,000 plus days every single day. I don't meditate every single day, but pretty much every day. But also to me, meditation, after a while, it's become a less formal practice. So sometimes I will formally meditate. Other times I can go on a run and it can just be really meditative. I can focus on the move. It's funny, when a friend of mine tried to get me into running 25 years ago, we used to go once a week on a little 5K run in London. And he used to say to me, are you feeling it yet? Are you in the zone? And I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? No, I'm not feeling this. I get that now, and it's when, that first 2 or 3 miles maybe you're thinking too much about, this is sore and that's sore and ooh. And then you get into the zone and you're just focused on nothing, really. That's the beauty of it. You're focused on the move. You're focused on the environment where you are. You're just moving. And you can just carry on going forever almost. So that can be very meditative as well. But I think probably if I was going to put my stick in one thing, it's movement of some kind. That is important to me, and not just important for fitness. It's important for mental clarity as well.
It's really interesting that you draw that connection there, because I, for a long time, and a lot of people I talk to will think about movement only as a fitness, as a related to fitness thing. And somebody that I was learning from said, you have to understand, Dusty, that if you want your mind to move, your body must move first. Like they're synced. Like your mental movement and capability for mental movement is directly correlated with your ability to move your body. So you can't just parse them out. Like if you want to be mentally sharp, and it made me stop and think, because when I was doing a lot of Ironman racing and marathons and those types of things, I would say that I was cognitively at the best of my career. I was certainly in great shape, but I was also, it is meditative when you, like you just said, when you go out on a long run, and some days you just turn off the podcast or the book or the music, and you just feel it. You just think, you let your mind move. And I've always been amazed at how much the mind moves when the body moves first. So I'm glad that that's your first principle, because I think it's a good reminder for me and for everyone else. It's so important. I was having a conversation earlier this week with a former strength and conditioning coach for the Miami Heat, 32 years, multiple NBA championships. And I asked him the same question, and his was very similar. I'm going to move every day, and I'm going to get some sunshine. And if I can't get some sunshine, I'm going to go find a way to get outside and take the breath of the external air. It was just super cool these first principle things matter so much.
That sunshine's an issue when you bring up. When I lived in London, I didn't realize, how after moving to LA and after being there for a while, I realized that I do need sun. And that doesn't mean I do not sunbathe. I have no interest in sunbathing, but I can get regenerated by the sun. The place I'm in Porto right now, we've got a lovely big balcony, which gets sun probably 10 plus hours of the day. I get re-energized by the sun, by just that energy.
It's so powerful, and it's so easy to forget it, and it's so easy to get in our little caves, and I'm guilty of it too. Like we get so focused on the goal that we forget about the journey. What's a leadership lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
I'll give you the first ever lesson I learned on that. Because it was back at university. I'll never forget this. In fact, I posted actually I haven't posted a blog, but the blog's about to get posted. I started writing it, which is, I remember back at university, I became the treasurer of what at the time was called the management. It was the management society, but what we got our money from was a coffee shop on campus. So it wasn't, a lot of these societies or whatever, you get a budget. We didn't get a budget, and we ran the coffee shop. It wasn't making any money, so I came in and I'm like, okay, change everything, and they made it nice and profitable. And the head of the management department, which nowadays is called the business department, came up to me and, sat me down. And she was a serious woman, had like 9 kids, and, you did not mess with her. And she sat me down and she said, your problem is, yes, you have lots of good ideas, but you piss everyone else off. Like, the rest of the board, or whatever you want to call it, was just disliked me. She said, you need to take your ideas and let them seem like they're other people's ideas. It's fine to have all the ideas, but, and I've found that's a lesson that I still look at. You put especially as a senior manager, as a founder, as a C-suite, whatever, once you've put your ego out of it, I honestly don't care if the idea is mine or not. I want the business to do well. So I often will take an idea and let it be someone else's. even though it wasn't their idea, but I'm fine with that. So it's made people seem like it's, let them believe it's their idea. Mm. And that is a lesson that honestly is still stuck with me to this day, 30 odd years later. And I'm literally about to post a blog on that. I started writing it the other day.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to read it. I will be sure. I'm subscribed to your stuff, so I'm sure I'll get it. And it's amazing how those lessons carry forward and how they're impactful. And, when you start talking about, if you care all about the goal, then you care about who gets the credit. But if you care about the journey, then it's much more about the team and we and who cares, who absolutely cares. So let me wrap with this question. Then I got a few follow-up things. But at the end of the day, when you shut it all down, what has to have happened during the day for you to go, today was a good day. Today was successful.
Hopefully there was some movement in the morning. Hopefully I ticked off some things from the list that as an entrepreneur is never completed, but hopefully ticked off. Hopefully I ticked off more than I added.
Yep.
And hopefully there were some wins in business in one form or another. We all are in it to win in one form or another. So hopefully there were some wins. I think, if I've had time with that's sort of when I'm switching off the laptop. If you look at when am I switching off, your question is more switching off being going to sleep. Then, have you spent time with someone who's important to you?
And that's the question. That's the real question I'm asking. And it leads to that.
It's a new journey I'm learning. And I, again, wrote a blog about that one, actually, which is, I said, I wrote this one a couple of weeks ago. I said, something along, I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but it was along the lines of, at the end, when I die or whatever, I don't think I'm going to look back and say, I won all these fantastic business deals. No, I think I'm going to say, well, this is the time that mattered with those that I love.
And for entrepreneurs, and for a lot of people, but for entrepreneurs in particular, because we are so obsessed with whatever it is that we're doing and the baby that we've birthed out of our mind, we can get those priorities backwards. And I know I've wrestled with that many times over the years.
I may say these lessons, and I say them to myself as well, because, you need to say it to yourself. We all forget it in the heat of the moment.
Yes, we do. Well, one of my mentors once told me, they said, Dusty, we most often teach what we most desperately need to learn. And so it's through the teaching and the reaffirming and the over and over communicating that we're also learning for ourselves. Leo, this is amazing. Are there any causes or organizations that you're particularly passionate about supporting?
So I've been involved for many years with charitable organizations, generally educating children especially. Most recently, actually, I'm not on the board of any right now, just with my whole change. I sort of left at the end of last year, but I will jump back on again at some point. The organization that I was on the board of for 11 years and chairman of for 7 years on the West Coast was a network for teaching entrepreneurship. We taught over 30,000 kids whilst I was chair. And, for me, what I loved about that is I always say, as an organization, we say we're teaching the entrepreneurial mindset. I always said we're teaching these kids 2 skills. How to think differently and how to have confidence, which to me are the 2 skills an entrepreneur has. And, these are underserved communities. Our graduates earn on average 50% more than their classmates. To be able to make that much of a difference to these kids' lives, it makes a difference for the rest of their lives.
Man, that's powerful. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, because you may never know the impact of those efforts for that person. But for that person and for the people that they will then influence, it's a perpetual, it's a legacy. That's really cool. Leo, how can our audience learn more about you? How can they follow along with your writings and your podcast? And I'm going to be checking out your Healthy Habits app myself, but how can people learn more?
Well, thank you. So leogestetner.com is the easiest. So that's my personal website. So my first name, last name, so leogestetner.com. I've got that. You can get there from my podcast. You can find coaching I offer. You can find links to all my businesses and my whole business and personal journey and my random thoughts that come up in the blog. along with my marathon journey and my digital nomad journey. So that's always a good place. You can find me on LinkedIn, again, Leo Gestetner, and always happy to chat to people, especially aspiring entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Leo, this has been an absolute delight. And I love the way you have articulated the importance of both being present and knowing when and how to pivot. And frankly, I don't know that you can really be good at pivoting if you're not present, because you have to be present in order to pivot. So thank you for illuminating that for me. It's given me some things to chew on for the remainder of my day. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Dusty. I really enjoyed being on here with you.
Awesome. If today's episode gave you something to think about, something to apply, then there's more where that came from. Head over to arcusgroup.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's where we share tools, insights, and our leadership frameworks to help you lead with more clarity, more alignment, and more impact. No fluff, just what helps you lead better. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time on Leadership Unlocked.